You know that weird feeling when you're technically part of a family, but always feel like a guest in your own house? Yeah, that's been my entire life in a nutshell. I'm Shane, 28 years old, and I'm the other son. Not the golden one. Not the one who made the varsity team. Not the one who got the loud applause at his graduation, and definitely not the one who had mom's framed baby photo on the fireplace mantle. That honor has always belonged to my older brother, Aaron. The successful one. The one who could do no wrong, even when he very much did. Growing up, I always had this sense that I was living in Aaron's shadow, like I was just some background character in his perfectly lit spotlight. If Aaron scored a B+, my parents would cheer like he'd won an Olympic gold medal. If I got an A, well, that's what we expect from you, Shane. There was always this underlying tone, this quiet shrug that seemed to say, "You're not Aaron, but I guess you'll do." I can't tell you how many times I heard some version of, "Well, Aaron just has that spark," as if I was some dull utility light flickering in the basement. It wasn't that I hated him. Not at first. Aaron was charming, confident, loud in a way that made people lean in, not recoil. Teachers loved him. Coaches worshipped him. Even my childhood friends would kind of gravitate toward him when he was around. And to be fair, he wasn't cruel to me when we were kids. He just didn't notice me. Like I was a hallway lamp that he passed every day and never thought about. The shift started somewhere around middle school. Aaron hit a growth spurt. He got tall, athletic, and unbearably smug. And that's when the comparisons started getting louder. He became a local football star, small-town legend type stuff. And suddenly, our entire dinner table revolved around his stats, his scouts, his dreams. Meanwhile, I was quietly teaching myself how to code on a used laptop and getting straight A's with barely a nod from anyone. I still remember the night I showed Mom a little app one built from scratch. She blinked at the screen and said, "That's nice, honey." "Hey Aaron, did coach finally start you as quarterback this week?" At first, I tried harder. I thought if I kept winning awards, getting scholarships, maybe they'd see me. Really see me. But the more I tried, the more invisible I felt. I didn't even get a proper send-off when I moved out for college. No packed lunches, no tearful goodbye at the station. Just a casual, "Text us when you get there." Aaron had a whole party when he left. Balloons, cake, a slideshow. My parents cried when his car pulled away. For me, silence. But here's the kicker. Aaron didn't even finish college. He got into a decent school on a football scholarship, but flunked out sophomore year. Drinking, partying, skipping classes. He moved back home like nothing happened. Mom told everyone it was because he missed his family. Dad said, college just wasn't challenging enough for someone like Aaron. Meanwhile, I was grinding through a dual degree, working part-time, paying rent in a shoebox apartment 4 states away, and sending home Christmas cards that never got a reply. By the time I graduated and got my first real job in tech, Aaron had already landed a cozy desk gig at a buddy's car dealership, thanks to one of Dad's golf friends. No experience, no background check, just a wink and a "we trust you, son." They celebrated like he'd won the lottery. I got a junior developer job at a mid-sized firm that would eventually lead me into 6 figures. I mentioned it over dinner during a rare visit home, and Mom just said, "That's nice, honey. So you're still doing the computer thing." Still doing the computer thing. That phrase haunted me for months. It reduced every late-night code sprint, every promotion, every certification, to a casual shrug. Still doing the computer thing. I started pulling back after that. I called less. I stopped coming home for random holidays. My visits were reduced to once a year, Christmas, and even then, I always left feeling smaller. Aaron would show off his new watch, his new lease, his new girlfriend. There were always new girlfriends. Mom would beam at him like he hung the stars. And Dad would sit at the head of the table, nodding in approval, as if Aaron's mediocrity was something sacred. I was polite. I brought gifts. I smiled through gritted teeth. But last year, something shifted in me. I got promoted. Not just a small raise or a new title. I got offered a leadership role in a rising AI startup, stock options included. Overnight, my net worth exploded. I didn't tell anyone at first. I kept working, investing smart, living lean. I didn't need their applause anymore. But I did start thinking about something I hadn't thought of in years: revenge. Not the dramatic movie kind, but a quiet, controlled kind. The kind that looks like success. The kind that forces people to see what they've ignored. And then I found the house. It wasn't just any house. It was the house. The one my parents had always dreamed of buying when I was a kid. This beautiful, two-story colonial-style place with a wraparound porch and a giant maple tree out front. We used to drive past it on our way to school, and Mom would sigh. If only we could afford something like that. Dad would scoff. One day, when Aaron makes it to the NFL. Of course, that never happened. They gave up on that dream years ago. But I hadn't. I bought it. Quietly. In cash. No mortgage. No debt. Just one signature, and the deed was mine. I fixed it up. Made it even better than they remembered. And then I planned my visit for Christmas. I didn't mention a word of it to anyone. Not when I RSVP'd. Not when I bought their gifts. Not even when I showed up at the front door with a smile and a bag of presents. Aaron was already there, of course, showing off his latest business venture, some pyramid scheme disguised as a crypto startup. Mom and Dad were gushing over him, as usual. I was barely through the door when Mom hit me with, "Try not to make any sarcastic comments this year, Shane. We want a peaceful Christmas." Right. I didn't even react. I just smiled and said, "Don't worry. I've got something special planned." And I did. But I wasn't going to rush it. The plan was set in motion. The house was ready. The paperwork was signed. All that was left was the reveal. And the fallout. But I didn't expect Aaron's reaction to be that dramatic. And I definitely didn't expect my mom to cry. Or for my dad to ask, in a cold, quiet voice, "Is this a joke?" That was the moment everything changed. But before we get there, let me tell you what led up to that moment. Because the real story didn't start with a house. It started at the dinner table 2 nights before Christmas, when Aaron said something that made my blood run cold. Dinner that night was supposed to be harmless. Just the 5 of us. Me, Aaron, Mom, Dad, and Aaron's flavor-of-the-month girlfriend, some girl named Madison with perfect hair and a glazed-over smile. She barely looked up from her phone the whole time, but that didn't stop Mom from fawning over her like she was the second coming of royalty. "You're just so poised," Mom kept saying, handing her a 3rd helping of mashed potatoes. "Aaron always picks the classiest girls. Right, Shane?" I blinked. I hadn't even spoken yet. I'd barely touched my plate. And suddenly I was being dragged into this weird, backhanded compliment tornado. "Oh yeah? Sure," I said, cutting my chicken slowly. Aaron didn't even look at me. He was too busy telling some story, loudly, of course, about how his startup was going to revolutionize the gig economy, whatever that meant. He used phrases like blockchain potential and market disruption, none of which made any real sense when you lined them up. But Mom and Dad nodded along like he was unveiling the cure for cancer. "What about you, Shane?" Dad finally asked, somewhere between bites. "Still working from home?" I looked up from my plate. "Yeah, leading a new team, actually. We're building AI models for early-stage medical diagnostics. Partnered with a few hospitals." Dead silence. Madison looked vaguely impressed for a second, until Aaron cleared his throat and raised his glass. "Well, I'm just glad I get to help real people. We're working on a platform that lets underpaid workers control their own income. I've got like 3 VCs circling us right now." Mom gasped like he'd just said he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. "That's incredible, sweetheart." "Isn't that incredible, Shane?" I looked at Aaron, then at Mom, then at my cold chicken. "Yeah," I muttered. "Incredible." That word echoed in my head for the rest of the night. Incredible. Like it meant anything anymore. I helped develop a tool that could literally detect early signs of cancer in high-risk patients. And I was being compared to some fake crypto gig app. And losing. After dinner, Aaron cornered me in the living room. "Hey man," he said, half smiling. "Don't take it personally, all right? They're just old school. Tech stuff goes over their heads." I stared at him. "You think I'm upset because they don't understand AI?" He shrugged. "Kinda. I mean, look, what we do is different. I'm building a brand. You're writing code. It's like apples and oranges." I wanted to say something sharp, something that would pierce through that smug bubble he lived in. But I didn't. I just nodded and walked away, because I already had something better than a comeback. I had the house. And the timing? Perfect. The next day, I slipped out early. Said I was going for a walk, but really, I drove to my house. The house. I wanted one last quiet moment with it before everything changed. The place looked beautiful in the winter light, snow dusting the porch, wreaths hanging from the windows. I'd had it professionally staged, just to really twist the knife when the time came. Hardwood floors gleaming. A full spread of catered food waiting inside. Fireplace glowing. The living room already decked out with stockings labeled Mom, Dad, and yep, Aaron. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not just that. It was about proving, once and for all, that I wasn't invisible, that I had made it. And I didn't need their cheers or their cake or their slideshow to get there. But fate has a funny way of testing your patience. When I got back, things had shifted. Dad was in the garage, working on something with Aaron, some project I wasn't invited to. Madison was gone, thankfully, and Mom was in the kitchen, pulling trays of cookies from the oven. I offered to help, and she waved me off. "Why don't you go relax with your brother?" she said, not even looking up. "You always get so tense around the holidays." That was the moment I felt it. The tipping point. Tense. I asked carefully. She shrugged. "You just have this energy, Shane. Like you're always waiting for someone to applaud. Just enjoy being home." Home. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard it left a mark. "I'll be out back," I muttered, and left before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, the tension wrapped itself around everything. Aaron was louder than usual. Dad made 3 separate toasts at dinner, all of them about taking risks and entrepreneurship, each one clearly aimed at Aaron. Mom laughed too hard at all his jokes. I spent most of the evening nursing a glass of wine and counting down the hours. And then came the final straw. After dinner, we all gathered in the living room for the traditional gift preview. We usually open one present each on Christmas Eve. Aaron handed Mom a gift bag. Inside was a designer purse, probably fake, but glitzy enough to make her eyes water. "Oh, Aaron," she gasped. "You shouldn't have." He smirked. "Well, I did." Dad gave him a high five. Not a handshake. A high five. Then they turned to me. I handed over a small box. Inside was a keychain with a tiny house charm on it, engraved with their initials. Just a hint. A breadcrumb. Mom looked confused. "Is this for my keys?" "Something like that," I said, smiling. Aaron snorted. "Cute. Did you get that from a vending machine?" Dad frowned. "You know, Shane, you don't have to be ironic all the time. A real gift would be nice." That did it. I stood up, quietly, and said, "All right. You want a real gift?" Everyone turned toward me. "Follow me." They looked confused, but curious. I grabbed my coat, and they followed. Aaron kept making snide comments about how this better not be a prank. Madison had apparently returned. She threw on her jacket too, tagging along like she was on a reality show. 15 minutes later, we pulled up to the house. Their dream house. At first, no one said anything. The snow was falling gently, and the porch light cast a soft halo over the driveway. Then Mom gasped. Dad stepped out of the car, squinting. "Is this?" Aaron got out, arms crossed. "Why are we here?" I pulled the key from my coat pocket. "Merry Christmas," I said, walking up to the door. I unlocked it, opened it. Warm light spilled into the snow. Inside, everything was perfect. Music playing softly, candles lit, stockings hanging, food steaming. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. Mom walked in slowly, her hands trembling. She touched the banister, the polished wood, the fireplace. Dad was silent. Aaron stood by the door, still frowning. "Whose house is this?" I turned to him. "Mine," I said. His face contorted. "Wait, what?" I looked at Mom and Dad. "This is the house you always dreamed about. The one we used to drive by when I was a kid." Mom nodded slowly, still dazed. "I bought it." Dead silence. "I bought it. I fixed it up. I decorated it. And I'm giving it to you, for Christmas." Mom's eyes welled up. Dad looked stunned, then suspicious. "Wait a minute," he said. "Is this some kind of joke?" I shook my head. "No joke. The deed is in my name. The gift paperwork is in my car. It's real." That's when Aaron lost it. "Are you serious? You're giving them a house?" he spat. "What kind of stunt is this?" "It's not a stunt," I said. "It's a gift." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "No, it's a power move. You just couldn't stand not being the center of attention for once. So you bought your way into the spotlight. I wanted to give them something they always wanted." Aaron's face twisted. "No, you wanted to one-up me. You wanted to make me look like a joke." I didn't say anything, because, in that moment, I realized he wasn't entirely wrong. But the story doesn't end there. Because right then, right as the room began to split between gratitude and jealousy, Aaron said something that made everything stop. And I mean everything. He turned to my parents, red-faced, and shouted, "He's just trying to buy your love because he knows he's never going to have what I have." I raised an eyebrow. "And what's that exactly?" Aaron looked me dead in the eye. The family business. I blinked. What business? Dad flinched. Mom looked away. And Aaron? Oh, Aaron just smiled. Guess no one told you, huh? And that's when the truth started to unravel. Everything after that night felt like falling through ice. You know the moment. You think you're on solid ground, and then suddenly you're submerged, cold, disoriented, and gasping for something. Anything to hold on to. That's how I felt the second Aaron said those 5 words. The family business is mine. I remember standing there in that glowing living room, the house I bought, the house I gifted, while my parents just froze. Like they knew this moment was coming and didn't want to look at it too closely. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad suddenly found a deep interest in the fireplace mantle. And Aaron? He was grinning. The same smug, victorious smirk he wore when he beat me at anything, which, according to my parents, was everything. I asked it plainly, calmly, almost too calmly. What business? Aaron chuckled. Oh, come on. Don't act like you didn't know. You really think Dad's been working at that rundown dealership for fun all these years? Dad finally spoke, but his voice was low. We didn't tell you because, well, you had your own thing going. My stomach dropped. You mean the dealership is yours? Technically, Aaron jumped in. It's been in our name for a while. Dad and I co-own it now. I've been learning the ropes for years. My mind went blank. Years? Learning the ropes? I had never been invited to a single conversation, not even hinted at. And now I'm being told that while I was out building something on my own, pulling all-nighters, fighting for promotions, building a career, they were secretly passing down the family legacy like it was some treasured heirloom? I asked, again, this time barely above a whisper. You never thought to include me? Mom finally looked up. Shane, honey, you were always so independent. We didn't think you'd want that kind of life. That kind of life. The kind of life they'd given to Aaron. The golden child. The prodigal son who never left. I nodded. Once. Then again. And then I walked out the door. No dramatic goodbye. No yelling. Just silence. Because in that moment, something inside me broke. A quiet crack that had been forming since childhood finally split wide open. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. Not yet. Just numb. I drove back to my apartment in the city that night. Christmas morning. Alone. The snow was still falling when I got home, but the warmth I'd once associated with that day was gone. Like someone had flipped a switch inside me and drained all the color from the holiday. I didn't hear from them for 2 days. Then Mom texted, "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Dad emailed me, "Don't let this ruin things. You've built your own path. Be proud of that." And then Aaron, of course, posted on Facebook. A photo of him and my parents standing in the house I gave them, my house, with the caption, "Nothing like a family Christmas in our new home." No mention of me. No tag. No thank you. That's when the grief hit. Not for the house. Not even for the business. But for the lie I'd been sold my whole life. That if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet, and played nice, I'd earn their respect. Their love. Their attention. But respect isn't given to the quiet kid. It's given to the one who demands it. And for 28 years, I had never demanded anything. I took a few weeks off work. Said I needed time to handle some personal stuff. My boss understood. He'd seen the signs. The late nights, the lack of sleep. The slow crumbling of someone who'd been keeping it all together with duct tape and hope. The first few days were a blur. I turned off my phone. Ate junk. Watched TV until my eyes burned. I replayed every Christmas, every birthday, every car ride where Aaron was praised and I was forgotten. I let myself spiral. I let myself feel it, all of it. And then, on the 4th night, around 2 a.m., I opened my laptop. And I started to rebuild. Not out of vengeance. Not yet. But because I had to. I looked at the numbers. My savings. My stocks. The early equity from the startup. The projects I'd led. I wasn't just doing the computer thing. I had built a career. A portfolio. A future. And for the first time, I started seeing myself not as the other son, but as a man who had carved out a life without shortcuts. Without safety nets. I went back to work the following Monday with a new focus. I stopped waiting for recognition. I stopped shrinking myself in meetings. I pitched bigger ideas. Took bolder steps. And people noticed. A month later, I got invited to speak at a tech conference. The topic, underdog innovation, building success without the spotlight. Ironic, right? The keynote went viral. I didn't even know until a coworker sent me a link. "Dude," he wrote, "you're everywhere right now." And he was right. Overnight, I started getting DMs from people I hadn't talked to in years. College friends, former bosses, even a recruiter from Google. But the one message I didn't expect? Aaron. He texted me 2 words. "Nice speech." No context. No emotion. Just a dry nod from the throne he assumed would always be his. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because something had shifted. For the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval. I had found something far more valuable. Self-worth. But the story doesn't end there. Because while I was rising, Aaron was falling. And I didn't have to lift a single finger. It started with whispers. A mutual friend from high school reached out, said he'd seen Aaron pitching some investment opportunity at the local bar, half drunk, pushing a brochure that looked like it had been designed by a teenager in Microsoft Paint. Then came the rumors about the dealership, clients complaining about shady deals, staff quitting suddenly, bad Yelp reviews stacking up like snow on a windshield. I watched from a distance. Didn't gloat. Didn't intervene. Because I knew, deep down, that this was always coming. He had been given the keys to the kingdom, but he didn't know how to drive. And my parents? They started calling again. First it was casual, just checking in. Then it got more frequent. "How's work? Are you dating anyone?" And then, one evening, Mom asked me if I could come visit for dinner. I said no. And that was new. She didn't know what to say. I didn't explain. Because I wasn't done yet. I had one more move to make. Not out of spite, but to finally rewrite the story. To reclaim the version of me they never bothered to see. And that move? Well, that's where things get interesting. I didn't know it right away, but everything had been moving toward this moment. Every slight, every shrug, every time I was told, "You're just the quiet one." It had all been quietly fueling me. But the thing about power, real power, it's not loud. It's not thrown in people's faces. It's quiet, strategic, controlled. And I finally had it. The house had been the beginning. Buying it had shaken the family dynamic just enough to expose every crack. Aaron's ego, my parents' favoritism, the secrets they thought they'd buried under decades of carefully controlled narratives. All of it had started to unravel. But I wasn't going to settle for one surprise gift and a few uncomfortable truths. I wanted closure. Not just for me, but for the version of myself that spent 28 years trying to win a game where the rules were never in his favor. So, I started to plan. I didn't rush. I didn't lash out. I waited. I observed. I let Aaron think he'd won the last round. Let him keep smiling smugly in the Facebook photo where he stood in my house, like he'd built it himself. The more I thought about it, the more poetic it became. I hadn't just given them a house. I'd given them a stage. And now, it was time to direct the final act. First, I needed to understand what I was really up against. The family business, as Aaron so proudly declared it, wasn't just some dusty car lot anymore. Turns out, Dad had been investing heavily in the surrounding properties for years. A handful of parcels along the highway, a few auto service franchises under shell LLCs, enough that the dealership wasn't just a dealership. It was part of a small but growing web of assets. And I'd never known. I spent weeks digging. Quietly. Discreetly. I hired a friend of a friend, a forensic accountant I met at the AI conference, to look into public filings, property records, and anything else with a digital trail. I told him it was for a personal inheritance question, and he didn't pry. The guy was good. Really good. In 2 weeks, he sent me a PDF that almost made me laugh. The business was bigger than I thought. But it was also messy. Aaron had been made co-owner, yes, but only recently, and only on the condition that he learn the business. There was a clause buried in the operating agreement. If Aaron failed to bring in a profit for 2 consecutive quarters, his stake would revert back to Dad. There it was. The weak point. And guess what? The business wasn't doing well. Those bad Yelp reviews, the employee walkouts, they weren't just rumors. They were the canary in the coal mine. And Aaron was too busy pretending to be Elon Musk on Facebook to see the financial cliff he was barreling toward. I took a breath. The opportunity was there. But I needed one more thing before I made my move. I needed leverage. Enter Lexi. Lexi and I had dated in college. Smart, sharp, and endlessly patient, especially with someone like me, who used to flinch at his own reflection. We'd lost touch after graduation, but when I saw her name pop up as a featured speaker in a business tech webinar, I decided to reach out. We grabbed lunch a week later. Just catching up, nothing heavy. At least, that was the plan. By the end of the meal, I had everything I needed. Lexi worked for a private equity group that specialized in distressed family-owned businesses, car dealerships included. She wasn't the shark I remembered her to be. She was bigger now, colder, sharper. She had that same ruthless efficiency I saw in the mirror during late nights coding algorithms that predicted hospital resource flows. I told her about my family, vaguely, of course. I called them friends at first, but she saw right through me. You don't want to sell their business, she said, stirring her coffee slowly. You want to own it. I didn't deny it. She smiled. Let me guess. Big brother messed up. Daddy's little empire is about to go under. And now you want to step in. It's not about revenge, I said quietly. It's about finally getting a seat at the table. Or maybe just flipping the table over entirely. She leaned back, eyes glinting. Well then, let's set the table ourselves. Over the next 3 weeks, Lexi and I laid the groundwork. I offered to invest, anonymously, through one of their shell LLCs. It would look like an outside party was interested in helping them recover, offering an angel round to restructure the books, bring in consultants, and help expand into hybrid vehicles and electric sales, which the dealership had ignored entirely. It was a brilliant angle. Aaron, of course, bit immediately. He pitched it to my dad like it was his idea. I heard about it through a cousin, who heard about it from Aaron at a family barbecue I hadn't been invited to. Classic. But I wasn't upset. I smiled. Because he had no idea the investor was me. No idea that the consultant I recommended, the one who'd be reviewing all operations, HR decisions, and finances, was someone Lexi handpicked to audit everything Aaron had touched. I didn't even have to lift a finger. He was walking into the trap himself. But I didn't stop there. I wanted one more layer of insurance. So I went to visit the dealership. Unannounced. The place looked worse than I remembered. Faded banners. Cracked asphalt. A peeling, now hiring sign in the window. I walked in and was immediately hit with that mix of cheap cologne and stale coffee. A receptionist barely looked up. I'm here to see Aaron, I said. She squinted at me, then buzzed the back office. He came out a few minutes later, clearly surprised. Shane. Hey. He blinked. What are you doing here? I gave him a small shrug. Just checking in. Heard things were getting serious. His chest puffed slightly. Yeah, well, we've got some big moves coming. Investors are circling. Dad says I might be ready to take over completely soon. I nodded. That's great. Seriously. Just wanted to see it for myself. He gave me a tour. A half-hearted one. Tried to dazzle me with business speak he barely understood. I listened. I smiled. I asked good questions. And then, right before I left, I planted the seed. You know, I said, I've been thinking about leaving the tech world. He froze. What? Yeah. I mean, I've made good money. But there's something appealing about real businesses. Legacy. Community. Roots. Aaron looked uncomfortable. Why are you telling me this? I shrugged. I don't know. Just wanted you to hear it from me in case. I dunno. I start making moves around town. His jaw clenched. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head. I left before he could respond. Because I wanted that paranoia to stew. And it worked. 2 days later, my mom called. Aaron's worried. He says you've been sniffing around the dealership. I stayed quiet. He thinks you're trying to compete. I'm just exploring options, Mom. She sighed. Can't you just let him have this? There it was. The sentence. The theme of my life. Let Aaron have this. Let him be the star. Let him take credit. Let him shine. I didn't answer her. Because this time, I wasn't letting anyone take anything. And the best part? I didn't have to take it by force. He was going to hand it over himself. Just a little more pressure. Just one more step. And the whole thing would collapse. But what I didn't expect, what none of us expected, was for my father to finally show his hand. And once he did, everything changed. Revenge, when it's done right, doesn't need applause. It doesn't need fireworks or public humiliation. It doesn't need screaming matches or courtroom drama. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is the one delivered quietly, behind closed doors, with a pen and a signature. The kind that rearranges a person's entire reality. While you sip your coffee on a Monday morning, watching it all unfold from a safe, calm distance. That's exactly what I did. And it all started with my dad's voice on the other end of the phone, calm and clipped. We need to talk. I hadn't spoken to him directly since the night of the house reveal. That moment in the living room when I handed him the keys, and he asked if it was a joke. It was the last conversation where I'd still been hoping, somewhere deep down, that maybe, he'd finally see me. This time, I knew better. We met at a quiet steakhouse 2 towns over, one of those spots where the waiters wore vests and called you sir. He was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, sipping scotch like a man who thought control came with age. He got straight to the point. Aaron's made a mess. I didn't pretend to be surprised. He's always had vision, my dad went on, but no discipline. And now with the investors sniffing around, the books under review, and half the staff threatening to walk. He trailed off. I waited. Finally, he leaned forward. Is it true you're behind the investment group? I met his eyes. Yes. He didn't react, just nodded slowly, like a man who'd suspected it but hadn't been ready to face it. And why didn't you come to me directly? I laughed softly. Would you have listened? He didn't answer. Because he knew the truth. I continued. I built myself from the ground up. You never offered me anything. No advice. No help. You handed Aaron a business and watched him drive it into a ditch. You told me to be proud of my own path. But the moment I built something better than he ever could, you called it a stunt. Silence stretched between us. I'm not trying to destroy you, I said. I'm offering a way out. You want the business to survive? Let me take over. He looked genuinely torn. He's your brother. And I'm your son. His jaw tightened. I let the words hang in the air. Eventually, he exhaled. I'll think about it. That was all I needed. Because while he was thinking, I was acting. Lexi and her team had completed their audit. The numbers weren't just bad, they were catastrophic. Inflated sales reports, unpaid invoices, tax filings 2 quarters late, and, cherry on top, Aaron had siphoned off nearly $40,000 for marketing expenses that included dinners, watches, and a failed influencer campaign with some minor reality TV star. We confronted him in the dealership conference room. It was just me, Aaron, Lexi, and a lawyer from the investment group, who, of course, was also mine. Aaron walked in cocky. He wore a blazer and designer sneakers, acting like he was stepping into a business negotiation. He didn't know Lexi, didn't recognize the lawyer. He thought I was just there to mediate. I let him talk for 10 minutes. Let him pitch growth strategies and vague ideas about NFTs and virtual showrooms. He kept referring to my investors, trying to dazzle them with charisma. Then I slid the audit folder across the table. He glanced at it, then frowned. What's this? Your performance review, I said, evenly. Our offer was conditional on a thorough audit of the dealership. His smile faltered. Lexi spoke up. Your mismanagement has put the business in breach of state compliance laws and federal tax regulations. The current liabilities exceed operational cash flow. Under the co-ownership clause, your father has the right to revoke your stake immediately. Aaron went pale. Wait, what? This is my company. No, I said. It never was. You just thought it was. He started to stammer. This is bulls. You set me up. I leaned forward, calm and composed. No, Aaron. You set yourself up. I just let the consequences find you. Lexi passed him the legal paperwork. The new ownership transfer. Aaron's signature was the last thing needed to formalize the transition. But he refused. He shoved the folder back. I'm not signing this. You think you can just waltz in here and steal everything? After all I've done for this family. I didn't blink. You mean like throwing me under the bus every Christmas? Or taking credit for my house? Or hiding the business from me for years while pretending I didn't matter? He stood up, furious. This isn't over. I stood too. Oh, it is. And then I walked out. He followed me into the parking lot, still yelling, swearing, flailing. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to, because I'd already won. The next morning, Dad called again. He signed. That was all he said. I didn't ask how the conversation went. I didn't ask what broke him. Maybe it was the weight of the debt. Maybe it was the realization that he couldn't talk his way out this time. Maybe it was the look on my face, controlled, resolved, unshakable. But it was done. I took over the dealership that week. Lexi's firm handled the restructuring. We rehired the staff Aaron had driven out, implemented a real accounting system, and brought in EV inventory from a regional supplier I'd partnered with through the AI firm. Within 3 months, profits turned positive. 6 months in, we were negotiating an expansion. My parents? Well, the house got quiet. At first, it was strained. Awkward phone calls. Stilted conversations. Mom called more often, usually to ask how the business was doing. I kept it polite, civil, but I didn't go out of my way to rebuild something they never truly valued. Then, One day, she asked me if I'd come home for Thanksgiving. I don't know, I said honestly. Is Aaron going to be there? Long silence. Then no. I went. Not because I wanted closure, but because I didn't need it anymore. I walked into my house that November and saw the photos on the wall. New ones. Me at the conference. Me shaking hands with a city councilman. Me standing in front of the dealership ribbon cutting. Aaron's pictures? Gone. They didn't say anything about it. They didn't have to. At dinner, Dad raised his glass. To Shane. For showing us what leadership really looks like. I nodded. No smile. Just quiet understanding. After dessert, Mom pulled me aside. Her voice was soft. I'm sorry. For how we treated you growing up. We didn't see it. I know, I said. But I did. That was the last time we spoke about the past. We didn't need to. Because I wasn't that quiet kid anymore. I was the man who bought their dream house, saved their business, and rose without their help. Aaron, he moved to another state. Tried to start a YouTube channel about entrepreneurship. Last I checked, it had 72 subscribers and a video titled, How to Bounce Back from Betrayal. I didn't click it. I didn't need to. Because revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about rebuilding yourself so completely, so undeniably, that the people who doubted you can't help but watch from the sidelines. And as I stood in my dealership one quiet morning, papers signed, lights on, employees laughing in the background, I finally understood something. I hadn't just taken back what was mine. I'd built something better. From scratch. Without shortcuts. Without applause. And that was the real victory.